Me and my friends went camping, and it was the worst mistake of my life. How does one comprehend the impossible, the truly impossible, but I suppose this would be the improbable as this happened to me. This all happened a few weeks ago. I was living a perfectly boring life, but after that day I can't even leave the house. I see it racing around my mind, but the image so clear, like it's standing there in front of me. I feel myself trapped in the moment, tortured by the memories that haunt me. I'm writing this as a warning, and in case nobody ever hears from me again, to act as a recant of what happened. Don't go into the woods. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon at the supermarket where I work. Stood behind the register scanning people's stuff, glazed look in my eye, just waiting for something to happen. Until my best friend, out of respect for their families, for the purpose of this story, I will be calling all my friends by their first initial. T calls me out of the blue and asks if I can take the next few days off from work to come camping with him and some friends. I have some vacation days saved up, so I say I'll check with my manager. It wasn't unusual for T to call me up randomly. He's the free-spirited, rock climbing, hiking, surfboarding, frickin' paragliding type that always has something they want to get you into, but as far as most of the things he's tried to get me into, camping's pretty tame. Of course, there was going to be a something else to it. T wasn't the type to do something so relaxing. But at the time I didn't care. I just wanted a few days to hang out with my friends, drink some beers, have some BBQs, and just chill. If only I knew what I was in for. The place we arrived at was called Chopko Lake. Apparently T discovered it on his most recent hike into the mountains. It was a beautiful place. The water was crystal clear. You could see all the way to the bottom. The spruce trees that surrounded us were so thick that we were completely secluded. You could barely see 10 feet into the forest. A perfect place to relax for a few days. This was not a well-established trail. We were pretty off the beaten path, but still only around 3 miles from the road we came here on, and left the cars. I don't know how more people don't know about the place. We are completely alone. The other 3 friends that came with me and T are E, J, and T's girlfriend L. I've known E and J since high school, but I've known T since I was a baby. We grew up across the road from each other and have been best friends since birth. But L I had only met twice, once at a party T and L were throwing as a meet my new girl thing, and the other was today. That being said, we all got on well. The first day was mainly just spent setting up camp, getting a fire pit established, and getting the food hung up in a tree away from camp. I was told by T and E that there were bears out here. I didn't know if they were messing with me, but I wasn't taking any chances. I'm just glad I brought my rifle with me. I was hoping to catch a deer while we were out here. While we were setting up E and J's tent, they weren't a couple, but we only had 3 tents, and nobody wanted to bunk with me because I have insomnia and keep them awake. Something felt weird, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what was wrong. It wasn't anything inherently wrong, it was just odd, and I wasn't the only one that had noticed it. He didn't say anything, but I could see on his face he had noticed it too. After we got the tents up, we all sat around the fire drinking a couple of beers, and we had some sandwiches prepped by L before we left, so we didn't have to make food on the first night. She was nice like that, as I had been repeatedly told by T. We exchanged funny stories, like the time J bet T he couldn't climb to the top of a lamppost and he ended up falling onto J, and J remarked that the fire reminded him of E's ginger hair flowing in the wind. We all laughed. I still remember the sound of them laughing, but it was followed by the most horrific shriek ever. The sound was like no sound I have ever heard. It was like a child was being ripped limb from limb, only the sound seemed to come from everywhere, all around us, in every direction. Needless to say, we all hurried to bed pretty quick after that. I sat in my tent all alone, rifle in hand, all night listening, looking for shadows. Nothing much happened though. As we woke the next morning, it was clear none of us had slept very much, if at all. The air was thick with fog and the fire had burned right down to the embers. We got the fire going again and sat around the fire. Nobody wanted to be the first to speak up about last night, so we all just sat there in silence until T decided to be the one to speak. What the hell was that last night? One by one they all jumped in. It must have been a mountain lion. They make a sound like that. What if someone was hurt last night? All good theories, but that's all they were. L tried to change the subject with breakfast. We all sort of agreed that we should. I think it was more to put our minds off it than actual hunger. We all headed out of camp to the tree where we hung the food, only to discover the remains of what used to be our food. The ground was littered with empty meat packets, burgers, steaks, ribs, all gone, but nothing else. T said it must have been a bear, and I said, if it was a bear, they would have eaten everything, not just the meat, and even if they had, why hadn't any of the other scavengers come to eat what's left? That's when it hit me what was wrong with this place, what was making the hair stand up on the back of my neck the other day. It was the sound. There wasn't no insect sound, no bird song, nothing, just the noise of the trees blowing in the wind. We beelined it back to camp as quickly as possible. The safety of our camp, what felt like an impenetrable fortress compared to being out in the forest. The day progressed onward. We were all frightened and ready to go home. We all collectively agreed to leave this afternoon, so we started tearing down camp. We were almost ready to go when we hear the sound of E screaming for help, but we all turn around to see where it was coming from, and Jay said he just went into the wood to take a leak before we left. We all run into the woods, me armed with my rifle, T with a pistol he bought to fend off bears. It wasn't until we got deeper into the forest that we realized that the scream was almost monotone, like there was no emotion behind the screams of what seemed like excruciating pain. At this point the sun was starting to set, and through the thick tree canopy it looked like night, We kept walking through the forest, but we never seemed to get any closer. It had been going on for around 20 minutes at this point. No matter how much we walked, we never got any closer to the source of the noise. We all eventually came to a clearing in the forest. There was something familiar about it, the trees, the lake. It was our camp. Well, since we cleared everything, it was just a clearing now with a fire pit in the center. How did the screams lead us back to where we started, and more importantly, why? I approached the fire pit and its old burnt-out coals. As I kneel by it, there was something I caught in the corner of my eye. It was E's body dangling, but not hung from a tree. He was being held by his feet by that impossible thing. E's body was torn to shreds. He had large gashes down his front. The blood that oozed from the gashes was the deepest color of red I had ever seen. It turned his ginger hair a dark shade of orange. He died screaming in pain, the expression etched into his face. I ended up writing much more than I intended, so I'm going to release it in 2 parts.